One of my favorite stories is The Lord of the Rings. In The Lord of the Rings, if you haven't seen the movies or read the books, there's a young mythological character named Frodo. And he's a hobbit. He's this little short guy. And he is faced with taking this ring of power to a place called Mordor to destroy it. And along the way, he meets fellow companions and they go on this giant journey and they face a lot of battles. And in the middle of the story and towards the end, he makes some really bad decisions because he starts to succumb to the power of the ring. But along the way, he has friends and he has people that help carry him. And eventually they succeed in carrying this ring to Mount Doom, destroying it. And you have a traditional happy ending in this movie where everyone rejoices. Your story right now may seem like everything else is just falling apart. You're in the middle of this, you've started your journey, and as far as you can tell, the Ring of Power is totally grasping its hold on you. You feel like you're stuck, you're going nowhere, you might as well give up. It seems like there's no community or no people around to help carry you through this season. The thing you have to remember is Frodo was in that moment too. And it was the middle of the story. It wasn't the ending. And so the biggest thing that we want you to understand is when you work through this program, when you read the book, go through the exercises, and watch these videos, you have a chance to rewrite your story and to write your own ending. In this first section, we're going to be looking exactly at what is self-harm. The common misconception is that it's just using razor blades to cut or a pocket knife, when in reality there's a lot more to it. Hair pulling, burning, broken bones that never heal, wounds and bruises that never heal. There's a lot more to it than what people are led to believe. On top of that, we're going to be looking at 6 different stigmas. So people assume that they're doing it for attention. It's hardly the case. On Vans Warped Tour every year, we meet hundreds of young people that are wearing hoodies in like 110 degree weather, which is pretty insane. A lot of it is they want to hide. They're embarrassed and they're ashamed of their scars and the things that they're doing to themselves. Most often when people harm themselves, it's while they're alone as well. A common misconception is that self-harm is a trend. One of the things that we've seen from history reports and antiquity is that it's very common practice within many religions, ranging back from the ancient Greeks all the way to biblical times, where people use it as a method of control or something different. It also needs to be noted that animals even have tendencies to self-harm. There's reports of baboons and monkeys that pull their hair out because of anxiety and encagement practices. Many people believe that when people self-injure, it's because they want to kill themselves. The reality is they're making wounds on themselves that are non-life threatening, and they're doing it as a way of emotional control or something much deeper to release trauma that they have experienced in the past. But we'll talk more about that in chapter 3. A lot of people don't understand how they can truly help with self-harm. They think that we should leave this to the professionals, that we should hospitalize them, that they're crazy, that they're dealing with extreme mental illness. Isn't it funny though, that when people are alcoholics or drug addicts, we put them in a community together and have them do life? So why do we treat people that are cutting as if they're a leper? The reality is the biggest impact that you can have on somebody that is going through self-mutilative behavior, self-injury, is being that person in their life that loves them and speaks to them. They're not crazy. They don't need hospitalization. They just really need you. Another misconception is that only teenagers self-harm. It's like this trend that they do because they can't deal with high school and they're going through peer pressure. But the reality is 1 in 5 college students right now is going through self-mutilative behavior. The people that we surveyed as well, we had parents that had gone through it, or still going through it. We had people in their 30s and 40s that were still struggling with the ideation of harming themselves on a daily basis. So to think that only teenagers do this is very misinformed. Another misconception that people have is that only depressed, emo, goth kids that dress in black and wear trench coats and listen to Marilyn Manson are going to be the ones that are cutting themselves or burning themselves or hair pulling, whatever it is that they're doing. And that's completely misinformed. In fact, we've talked to many football players, male football players that have self-harmed because they don't feel up to the demands and the pressure of playing for the game, cheerleaders. So to say that music causes this would be very misinformed. Would we say that Taylor Swift causes the people that are jocks and cheerleaders to suddenly harm themselves? No, that would be misinformed. So it's very much a misconception that a certain style of music would lend to this type of behavior. In this chapter, we're going to explore just exactly why people do it. What's the neurological, scientific reasons? What's the emotional reasons behind it? Throughout all the research that we've done, we found typically a lot of times people just don't know. They just feel better. But there are usually 5 reasons why people self-injure. Reason number 1, they want to express the emotional pain that they feel. Oftentimes when you're going through a difficult time, it feels like there's this ball of tension in your chest. And for them, that continues to grow and grow and grow, and they don't know how to release it. So by cutting themselves, it's a way to physically express the emotional pain that they're going through.
It kind of really just manifested itself because, you have a hyper-emotional mother, and you have a not hyper-emotional father, and then you have a brother who's 18 and trying to go do his own thing. Somewhere I had to grow up so that I could be an emotional stability for my mom. And that's not saying like she didn't have other people, but I was the only one in the house that she could, be emotional with. And I am, if nothing else, I'm a feeler. And so even if she wasn't asking me to feel with her, I felt so deeply with her because I have so much anxiety. Like I had to release it somehow. And that was a release of, I could be calm once that happened. And I wasn't like, I had to just go at it, you know what I mean? It was, you just, even if you just pricked yourself, that's a release of energy. Because you feel that burst of pain and then you just release the endorphins from that. And then your body calms down.
The second reason we discovered that people self-harm is a method of control. Everything in their life feels completely out of control. They can't control their finances, their job, how people view them, what's going on in school, the grades that they're getting. And so the one thing that they can control in their life is their pain. And so, as a method of control, they know when they can harm themselves and when they choose not to. A third reason that people typically self-harm is a return from numbness. Imagine you feel completely dead inside, that you've had horrible life events happen, and you want to feel other than something of just nothingness. People will inevitably turn to self-harm. Think of the movie Fight Club. Edward Norton's character in the movie, who's the narrator, creates a fight club and where people beat themselves bloody, a form of self-harm, just so that they can feel something other than the drudgery of their day-to-day jobs. In the same respect, many people who self-injure do the same thing.
The old song Iris, right? And it's when everything feels like the movies, you bleed just to know you're alive. At some point you feel dead inside. And so to make sure that you're still moving and you're still breathing and you're still doing something, you want to see blood come out, or you want to see a scar form, or you want to see, a bruise happen, because that means you're still living.
A fourth reason people self-injure is to punish themselves. They feel they deserve it. You're fat, you're ugly, you're gross, you're disgusting. Internal messages that they've heard over and over and over again. And so they believe, I deserve this. I deserve to be punished, and so therefore, I'll hurt myself. A fifth reason people self-injure is to distract from the trauma that they faced in the past. A good friend of mine was a victim of sex trafficking. And one of the reasons that she began self-injury was to distract from the trauma that she faced as a victim of sex trafficking. Ultimately, when people do this, it can be a childhood abuse that they don't want to think about. It can be an event in the past. It could be an experience in war. And ultimately, it's to escape, to not think about that. So they create pain as a way to distract their mind from having to remember the things that are emotionally scarring for them. You're probably wondering, what about the science behind it? Like, why do people do this? As humans, we know that there's positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. Positive reinforcement is, take your dog for example. He gets a treat every time that he learns to lay down. Negative reinforcement is, think about when you're a child and you put your hand on the stove and you remember not to touch a hot stove. Every child does it once and then they learn. The problem with self-harm is that it creates positive and negative reinforcements at the exact same time. So take for example, one of the reasons that we used for people who cut, to return from numbness. It's an example of both a positive and a negative reinforcement. They want to feel something other than numbness, so therefore they cut themselves. And they think, if I cut, then I can feel. They're using a negative reinforcement, cutting, to create a positive response. Now I can feel. And it sends mixed messages to the brain, therefore making it more and more difficult for them to kick the addiction because they're stuck giving themselves both positive and negative reinforcement at the exact same time. If you're a friend or family member, you probably are wondering how you could help. You're going to hear in the interviews here specifically the best practices that could have helped the people that we interviewed. One of the key things, though, that you might be asking is, what could I have done to prevent this? And we talk about this in the book. It's not the important question for the time being. Your sole job is to provide emotional first aid to your family member. And that begins by listening. Listening is a practice that most of us honestly don't do that well. If anything, we're typically formulating a response in our head so that we can either impact that person or say something profound or disagree, as opposed to what author Stephen Covey says, seek first to understand. What you want to do is suspend all personal beliefs or moral ideology towards that person and really try and step in their shoes. I imagine you've heard that quote, you can't understand somebody until you've walked a mile in their shoes. It's that exact same thing. It's suspending all of your belief systems and really hearing what that person is saying, as opposed to trying to formulate a response, and then reflecting back what that person is feeling. Not what you think that they said, but how they feel. When you do that, they'll feel understood, and then the walls begin to drop. So imagine that you're going through self-harm. Why do you want to cut? Why do you want to burn yourself? Why are you pulling your hair? Why are you going through the things that you are? What's the reason behind that? Really feel that for that person. The other thing that's key, don't be judgmental. Nobody likes to be judged. No one likes to be judged. And so therefore, you have to be at a point, a healthy point, to where your own personal anger or hurt can still be there in an underlying surface, but if anything, only judging them is going to make them feel far worse. Everyone wants to know how to approach a friend or a family member that's going through this. But how do we do it without scaring them off, right? Are they going to blow up in our face? Are they going to get angry? Are they going to retreat, become more isolated? Are they going to do this even more? The key thing in all of this is going to be, let the person know, hey, I know. But it's all in the way that you say it. If you're practicing empathy, it's not going to come off as, hey, I know that you're doing this and I'm so disappointed in what you're doing. Instead, let them know that you want to listen to them, you're here to talk about it, that you know, and when they're ready, you're there to be a listening ear.
If you have that relationship, if you have that communication, it's, hey, I'm here for you, and no matter what you're feeling, it's okay. I may not always be able to handle it, I may not know what you're going through, but I'll hold your hand, or I'll cry with you, or I'll watch stupid movies and eat popcorn, or go to a fair, or do whatever with you. Let's figure it out together.
Recovery is going to be our most important chapter. You really need to read this chapter, so I'm going to quickly recap here. The first thing is that you need to know willpower alone is not going to make you change. How many times have you said, I'm never going to do this again, only to find yourself doing it? Of course, and I guarantee that for many people that have gone through self-harm, they've said, I'm never going to do this again. I bet they've made promises to their dead uncle or even their best friend or their parents, and yet they still continue to do it. Willpower alone will not work. So once you realize willpower doesn't work, this is where the first step begins. You have to want to change. You can't help anybody that doesn't want to change. Otherwise, they're just going to continue to keep doing what they really want to do. Otherwise, they're going to continue to want to take that drink. Otherwise, they're going to want to continue to self-harm. They're going to want to continue to use drugs. It doesn't change their desire. They have to be the person that wants to change. And that may be hard to hear, especially if you're a friend or a spouse, but they have to come to the conclusion first that they're ready to make the changes in their life, to take those proactive steps. So if you're not there yet, at least you know. In January, a lot of people make New Year's resolutions to hit the gym, to get healthier, and yet by the end of the month, 80% of them have failed. Why? Like, they said they were going to do it. They said they were going to white knuckle and get it down, but nothing changes. Well, their environment's still the same. They're still eating the same food. They're still hanging out with the same friends. Their friends are like, let's hit up happy hour. Let's go eat McDonald's. Let's do all the... Nothing's changed in their environment. The same might be true of you. You may be stuck in the exact same environment that triggers you, that causes you to be alone, that allows you to feel the way that you feel, and it's destructive. So, in order to change your life, begins by changing your environment. One of the hardest things about recovery is the fact that in order for you to recover, you have to be vulnerable. And everybody thinks vulnerability is weakness, but think about the bravest people you know. They were probably vulnerable with you at some point in their life. When somebody bears their soul in front of a crowd of people, nobody goes, that guy's a weakling. Instead, they think, how courageous, how strong, how transparent, how authentic. And it's the paradox. We want authenticity and vulnerability when we look to everyone else, and yet it's the very last thing that we want to do ourselves. So in order for us to take proactive steps in recovery, it's going to begin by owning our story, telling it to somebody, and being comfortable enough and trusting them enough to share that story with them. The more that we own our story, the less power that it has over us. And the more that we get to be honest and upfront about who we really are and have people love us for exactly the struggles and moments that we're involved in.
Talk about it. Hashtag team talk about it. I will always be team talk about it, no matter how difficult it is, no matter how struggle bus it is, no matter how adulting sucks it is, team talk about it. Because if you don't talk about it, Hermione Granger in Harry Potter, fear of a name only increases fear of the thing itself, right? So if you don't say Voldemort's name, you're giving power to him because you are naming him something he who must not be named. It's this thing out of my reach. If you have depression, call it depression. If you cut, tell people. I cut, I want to stop. How do I do it?
It's important that you have accountability and feedback. You're going to want to have a community of people around you that can help you, that are encouraging, that you trust, that believe in you. Surround yourself with people that will hold you to a higher standard in a loving and empathetic way. We're not meant to do life alone. We weren't created to be alone. We were created for connection. And when we're alone, we isolate, things get worse, and we can easily relapse into the things that are destructive for us. So building a community, whether that is online at HeartSupport.com/community, where you can experience friendships on our live stream and people that care and are going to give you empathetic feedback, especially if you live in a very small town and you feel you don't have that. Or, and this is a big one, serving somewhere. Service is a key to recovery. It's a key to building friends. It gets you outside of yourself to giving towards others. And the more that you serve and see yourself positively impacting people, the more it begins to ignite your soul, the more opportunities that you'll have to connect with people that are passionate over the same things you are. If you're passionate about animals, serve at an animal shelter. If you're passionate about serving the homeless, serve at a homeless shelter. You're going to meet volunteers and other people there that are going to be passionate about the exact same things you are. It's going to get you outside of the loneliness and outside of the struggles that you're facing in your own life, and give you a chance to be authentic and vulnerable with them, and at the same time, do something bigger than yourself. In the 12 Steps and Traditions, we talk a lot about a higher power. I myself am a 12-step sponsor. Faith and spirituality play a significant role in numerous people's recovery. One of the most helpful programs in the world is AA. And the first step is admitting you're powerless, which we talked about. And then the second step is admitting that our lives have become unmanageable and there's a higher power that can restore us to sanity. So we don't want to dismiss faith and spirituality. While our organization founds itself on Christian beliefs and ideals, we realize this may not be something for everyone. But at the same time, think about how many awesome Harry Potter novels there are, and how everyone wishes there was magic and this, supernatural world. We love supernatural things, werewolves and vampires. Twilight went crazy. We're hungry for things that are spiritual and are supernatural. So there's a desire for us to do that. So if this isn't something you've considered, consider it. Check this section out. See how it can play a role. For myself, admitting to that higher power, my higher power is God. As a Christian, I believe that Jesus was God. And the reality of the situation was that I had to have somebody that said, your intrinsic value, your intrinsic worth is so vitally important to me, and I love you exactly as is. And that is every human being's desire, to be loved exactly the way that we are. The problem is all of us are flawed and very messy.
Listening to that message about how God loved everybody. When you learn about Jesus, Jesus loved everybody. And that sounds super cheesy, but when you are in the midst of depression and you feel like you are utterly alone, having someone that says they are going to love you no matter what you do, no matter who you are, no matter what story or what scars you have, that is one of the most enticing things you can ever hear in your life. And you don't have to give them anything. You don't have to do a single thing to earn God's love. If you're seeking that recovery and you're seeking that restoration and you're seeking that healing, he does call you to lay down your cross and follow him, but he doesn't necessarily call you to do it the second you say, Jesus, I love you. You know what I mean? He says, okay, let's learn how to do this together. Let's go on this journey together. Let's figure it out together, because I'm going to be here for you, and I'm going to carry you, and I'm going to love you, and I'm going to walk with you, and I'm going to hold your hand through it. But you gotta step, right? It's like when a baby learns how to walk. They generally walk on their tiptoes first because they're not sure what their footing is. But mom and dad are there holding their hand, telling them, okay, it's gonna be okay. We're gonna figure it out together. If you fall, I'll catch you. It's the same concept.
The problem with the whole self-love movement is that it creates kind of this love yourself. But imagine that you hate yourself, or you continue to end up in destructive relationships or habits or cutting. You can't say to yourself, I don't care that I'm a monster. I love me and that's enough. That will not convince you of your self-worth. Instead, our self-worth often comes from external sources and validation. That's why in recovery we talked about community and vulnerability and people that say, you're worth it, you are enough. Despite what you're going through, you're amazing and I believe in you. That's why it's so key. Our external validation always comes from somewhere. And if you have a higher power, that higher power is there to tell you, you are loved unconditionally, exactly as is. I love you and there's nothing that you can do to have that love be removed. And that's why it's important. Relapse is an extremely difficult thing to go through. The first thing that people assume when they relapse is somebody's going to judge me, and then they just heap tons and tons of that internal shame. I can't believe that I did this. How could I have? this is going to go back to your recovery techniques as well. And that chapter is going to cover a lot as far as building up shame resilience, learning how to grow. Growth is going to be the most important factor in relapse. If you do not take the opportunity to grow and learn from it, you will end up in cycles over and over again. You're going to do well for 2 weeks, and then you're going to fall back down because you built yourself up with guilt and shame. And then maybe you get stuck and addicted for another 7 weeks, and then you decide I've had enough, and then you go clean for 2 weeks. And instead of really making any real progress, you just keep heading backwards and backwards and backwards, because when events like that happen, you will only stay stuck in cycles. And we'll talk about this as far as the definition of insanity in the chapter. Doing the same thing over and expecting different results. Relapse does happen. It's unfortunate. For some people, it never happens. But for the vast majority of us, it's a very real reality.
I would probably say to someone that is relapsed and that is feeling that guilt and shame of the relapse, not necessarily from external, but from internal, and saying, I promised my parents and my friends and my spouse and my children and my dog and God that I wouldn't do this again, that I wouldn't self-harm, or I wouldn't punch things, or I wouldn't try to kill myself, or I wouldn't feel this way. It's okay. The outside Christian side of it, it's life is messy. Think of how many times we make fun of absolute stupid things celebrities do. Shia LaBeouf is a perfect example. Like, how many times do we make fun of him in a video? Doing the same thing that he swore to us he'd never do again. And we make fun of that, but it's also like, hey, he messes up, so can I. It's okay to fall. Just get back up. And on the Christian side of that, just look at the Old Testament. Hey guys, don't do this thing. Okay, God, we're not going to do this thing. We love you. We praise you. Get us out of this thing. We're great. Okay? Gets them out of the war. All right, cool. Idols. Bye, God. Every time. Entire New Testament. That's why we needed Jesus. Entire New Testament is, guys, don't do the thing. Okay, cool. We're not going to do the thing. God, we did the thing again. Can you get us out of it? Okay, but this is the last time. Okay, we did the thing again. All right, I promise. This is the last time. Same concept. God, we promise we'll never leave you again. And then a new generation comes, and they leave Jesus, and he comes back and says, I still love you. If you struggle with recovery, if you struggle with relapse, if you struggle with just the everyday life of, I don't know how to get up in the morning, but there's the sun, let's go at it. And then you pick up a knife and you have to drop it in the sink because it just feels too tempting. Or you lay in a bathtub and think how easy it would be to drown yourself. And no one would know. Pick up the phone. Call someone. Text someone. Say, I need you to come over, and I need you to come over now. Text 10 people. Because chances are, if you text one person, they may be in Ohio. You know what I mean? They can't get to you right now. Call somebody. Pick up a hotline. Ultimately, it's okay.
I myself remember the first time that I relapsed. It was after 3 years of sobriety. I just thought I was the most worthless human being ever. And the key thing that I did was I reached out to my sponsor, and I reached out to my friends, and I said, I relapsed. Can you help me? That was a pivotal, life-changing moment. The same steps that we laid out for you in recovery are going to be just as important when you relapse.